So in the previous video, we actually saw the basic YouTube player running on a device, on my Android device. And at this point, you might be wondering why I didn't actually run it on an emulator. Well, the reason is some of the required items like the Google Play service as well as the YouTube app are not actually available straight away on an emulator. In other words, what you normally have to do is go ahead and actually download and install those. And it's a reasonably complex task to actually download and set those up. So right now it's sort of something that I'm hoping to do in the future. I'll actually add a video to show you how to do that on an emulator. But for now, you'll actually need an Android physical device to run this. But we'll talk more about that anyway in this section. The bottom line is that it's best to actually run the YouTube app on a physical Android device, but it can certainly be done on an emulator, and I will actually eventually add a video showing you how to do that. So anyway, moving forward, so we've got the basic application working, and we actually created the YouTube activity class, and we were able to actually play a video. Now, it wasn't actually terribly complex, as you saw. There was a lot of sort of infrastructure code that was automatically generated, interface codes, and we just added a few things like looking at the code. We added here some toast messages, but all this code, this infrastructure code as I call it, was added automatically and is part of the standard functionality of the YouTube player. Now what we've done is we've got videos playing, but what we haven't done is actually got a playlist playing, and that's the next thing we want to do. So set it up to be able to play a playlist. And if you don't know that a playlist enables you to actually choose a group of videos and to be able to play those one after another and to skip to the next video or to the previous video. So what we're going to do is actually do that now. We're going to enhance the app. We're going to add a new class. We're going to add a class called Standalone Activity. And its function is going to be to play a video. It's more streamlined as well to be able to play and use playlists, which are a function of YouTube. And what we're going to do is hook up these two screens via a menu so that you can either choose the YouTube activity or the standalone activity. So just to introduce you to the base concepts of intents, which is the mechanism to actually go from screen to screen in Android. So let's get into doing some code. I'm going to create a new activity. So I'm going to come up here to YouTube player, the class com.timbercharker.youtube player, right click that, click on new, but instead of selecting Java class, I'm going to come down here to activity. I'm going to choose gallery. So you can either choose here blank activity, or you can go to the gallery, and that shows you a selection of different types of base screens that you can create. So there's all sorts of ones there. You saw me create one for Google Maps, etc. We're just going to choose blank activity, click on next. And in terms of the actual name, what we're going to do is we're going to change this main to activity. Because we've got a main activity in our application, which was created the first time we created the application, the actual wizard is trying to call this one main 2 activity, but we want to actually change that and call that standalone. So standalone activity. And you can see as we've done that, it's actually changed the layout name as well to activity underscore standalone. And the title is what we want to see on the screen. We can change that, actually set that up as well. And the other thing we can actually do is we can actually click on launch your activity, and that should put in the relevant part code into our Android manifest file. So I'm going to click on that and then click on finish to actually create that. So that's created this additional class called standalone activity, as you can see there. And we're going to comment out some of this code as we did with the YouTube activity shortly, but just checking our Android manifest file. We should see that if you recall in the previous video, we actually had to add this part ourselves, this intent filter. Up until here, we actually added that component ourselves, but because I selected the relevant option, the launcher activity, when we created via the new activity, it actually added that for us. So it just saves us having to do that. Okay, so the other thing we want to do is we want to delete the XML file that was generated when we actually temporarily created the Google Maps activity in order to get the SHA-1 key for the Google API key, which we also did in the previous video. So I'm going to come up here to Activity Maps, right-click, and delete. Select delete because we don't need that anymore, and we can leave all those options and just click on OK. Let's remove that. So what we're going to do now is go back to our standalone activity, and we want to delete some of that redundant code. So the code we actually want to delete is that floating toolbar code, and we did that in the previous class we created. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to comment that all out, making sure you don't comment anything extra. So if you commented out this additional line here, line 24, you'd find you'd be getting some errors in the file. So just that section. Then we do the same for Android standalone that we did for Android YouTube. Then go to there, and we want to comment out this section down the bottom here. So we're just going to do that. And press my command / to comment it out, and of course that's control / on Windows or a Linux machine. And we're commenting that out because we don't actually need that code at this stage. Now that we've done that, we want to create a basic interface. So this interface that we're creating for our activity standalone, which will be for our standalone activity, is going to be very basic. It's just going to have a little menu option so you can choose which one to go to. So to do that, first we need to come up here and click on content underscore standalone, double click that. And this is the base interface code. This is the base XML or the base layout that comes with the class. If we click on design, we can see that's what it's showing currently. We're going to actually change that. So I'm going to change that to a linear layout. So I'm going to come up here and double click where it's got relative layout. I'm going to make that linear layout. And you can see as I type that, the section down the bottom also updated as well. We need to also remove the padding lines. So all these padding lines here, padding left, padding right, padding top, padding bottom, we're going to delete all of those. And the other thing we need to do is we actually need to add a tag within the linear layout to change the orientation to vertical. So I'm going to come down here and type Android orientation equals and make that vertical like so. Next thing we do, we now need to add a couple of buttons. So we're adding the buttons so that we can actually click on a button to actually invoke a particular screen. So under the linear layout, before the slash linear layout, we're going to actually start typing in there. We put slash button. The width, we're going to set to width and height, we're going to set to wrap content. And what that basically means is this button should only use the amount of space it needs to show itself on the screen. If we hadn't made either of those match parent, then it will try and use as much of the screen as possible. We don't want that. We want it only just to use enough of the space of the screen to show the button. We're going to add an ID. So Android:ID equals @+ID /BTM play video. And we need that ultimately to be able to access this button so that we can attach some code to it so that when it's clicked or tapped on the screen, something will happen. We want to add a margin here as well. So I'm going to add that down the bottom. We'll call it Android layout underscore margin. We're going to set that to 5 dp, density independent pixels. Then we also want some text on the screen as well. So we're going to put Android text equals play video. And that's going to ultimately going to show on the screen. And what we can do with this, we can actually come over here and we can click on this extract string resource. And this is what I suggest you do whenever you're actually adding text like this. And what it does, we'll click on that. We're going to call this one play underscore video. Click on OK. And what it does, you notice how it changed that to @string/play video. Before it was actually text in there, but we've changed that to use the @string. And what actually happens is it actually creates another file, or adds that, I should say, to a file. And the file is in the values folder down here in the res subfolder. If you look in strings, and you can see it's actually added an option here called play underscore video. And the reason we're doing that is this is to enable support to be able to use this application in any language. So this is the mechanism that the Android Studio setup uses to enable us to use multiple languages. Now, we're not going to be setting up multiple languages in this particular video, but this is just showing you how you would actually go about it. So it's a step that I always recommend you do. You always create that string resource so that it makes it easier if you do want to upgrade your app in the future. So that's why I've done it like that. So that's good. That's our first button on the screen. We want to do basically exactly the same. So I'm actually going to copy and paste that and make a few little changes. So I'm just going to copy the whole thing, paste it, and I'm going to change where it's got button play video because these have to be unique, of course. And I'm going to make that list. So it's a playlist because that's what we're ultimately doing. And here I'm going to change that, and I'm going to change that. I'm going to type it in again. I'm going to type playlist. And then we can do the same thing, and then we can actually click in here. Click on this, extract string resource, and we'll call that play underscore playlist. And that changes that as well. And again, it's the same deal. If we go back to strings.xml, you see we've now got that additional entry in there. So that's good. So that should be all we need to do. And if we just click back down here into design view, we should see now we've got two simple buttons on the screen. So very, very simple interface. And obviously when we click those, that's going to actually invoke and go through and start actually something happening. Okay, so we've done with the layout now. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually put some code into the standalone activity.java file. But first what we're going to do is copy some code from the YouTube Java file because we're actually going to be using initially the same API key and the same video ID. So we're going to go to the YouTube activity, just up to the top, and I'm going to copy lines 14 and 15, these two lines here, copy that information, and we're going to go back to the standalone activity. And right at the top, under where it's the public class, I'm going to paste the code in there because we'll be using that in this code. We actually need another one. We actually need a playlist because I talked about having a playlist for this standalone activity class. So we're going to have a mechanism to paste that in. So it's going to be string, we'll call it YouTube _ playlist. We'll set that equal to TBA, to be added, because part of this video is we're going to go through and actually add that. And we also need now 2 private fields for our buttons. And the buttons, of course, we just created in our layout, our activity _ standalone layout. So it's going to be private button play video, and private button play playlist, like so. It does look a bit funny, but essentially that's what we're doing, is we're playing a playlist. Next, what we need to do is up here where it's got actually standalone activity extends app compat activity, we're actually going to change that or actually add something to it so that we can actually use this code. So we're going to change that and actually set that here after the app compat activity. And I'm going to go to the next line, but you can put it on the same line depending on how much screen space you've got. It's easier for you to see if I type it like this: implements view.onClick listener, like so. And it's going to come up with an error initially, but that's fine. The reason it's coming up with an error is it's asking us to make sure that we actually add the relevant classes, and it's saying, basically it's the words to the effect of saying, well, you need to set up this onClick view and you haven't done it yet, and that's why it's highlighting it in red. So we're going to actually go ahead and do that now. And to do that, we're going to come down here below the onCreate method, just before the last right curly brace. And I'm going to do my generate, which is Command N on a Mac. And I'm going to click on here and click on implement methods, or select implement methods. When I do that, there's going to be one option on the screen for onClick. And I'm going to click on OK. You notice how that created that for us automatically. I'm just going to make a bit of space there. And just out of interest, if you're not sure what the keystroke is to generate, like I did the Command N on a Mac, you can come up here to code and it's generate. You can type that, that does the same thing. And this will show you the keystroke, the shortcut for your operating system, Windows or Linux. On a Mac, as you can see, it's Command N. So moving on. So now that we've actually implemented or created that method, you'll notice that there's now no longer an error here. However, we haven't actually got any code in there. We've created an empty method that currently doesn't actually do anything. So what we actually need to do now is actually start writing some code. So before we go to the onClick section, we want to come in here under the toolbar. And so what I'm going to do is add some code there. And we need to actually associate the 2 buttons. So we've created the buttons here. We now need to connect them to the 2 buttons we created in our content standalone layout. So in order to do that, we're going to type button play video equals button in brackets, which is a cast, which actually tells that this is the type of view we want. Find view by ID, r.id.play, button play video. That's associating the first button. And the second one, of course, is the playlist. Basically the same thing, button find view by ID, r.id.button playlist. So we've associated those and we've connected the code in Java to the buttons which were in our content _ standalone layout. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually set our listeners up in a different way. What we've done in the past with our onClick listeners, which you've seen in previous videos, we've done something like button play video dot set onClick listener. Then we've done new view, and we've done that. And it's created the code for us. But we're not going to actually do that this time. And the reason is we're going to create one listener method effectively that actually is shared by both the buttons. And the reasons why we're doing that will become apparent shortly. So I'm just going to undo that change. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to set this up to the button play video dot set onClick listener. So set onClick listener, we're just going to type this. And what that basically means is we're going to be using this onClick method that we actually implemented. So we need to do that for the play video, and of course for the playlist video as well. Set onClick listener, this as well. So that's associating them. So basically they're going to be looking for this method, and when something is tapped on, when you actually tap the play video button or the play playlist button, automatically this code that's in this onClick method down here is going to be executed. So it's going to be called back. So the Android operating system is going to call this and say this particular button was clicked. So within the actual method itself, what we need to do is we need to start by typing intent. Intent equals null, and we'll talk about that again shortly. But the main thing we're going to do is type switch view.getID. Now what this actually does, this view.getID, bearing in mind that this method is going to be shared by both the buttons. So it's a one on-click listener method for both. The v.getID, and remember v is the view that is passed to this method, and of course this is shared now by both buttons. So what we're actually doing is we're actually retrieving what the actual button ID is. And because obviously depending on the button that has been clicked, we need to process a different action. We need to either play a single video or a playlist. So this get ID enables us to determine which button was actually clicked. So we can do that by typing case r.id.button play video, like so, break, in case r.id.btn playlist, break. So you can see by doing that, actually what I'll do is I'll also add a default. And default means if it can't find those two, well, this is what it'll do instead. So basically what's happened here is we've added a little bit of code to say that if the on-click method was called from the button play video, it's going to come into this group of code above the break. But if the button playlist was actually tapped, it's going to go into the code that's above this break as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish the video up here because it's getting a little bit long. In the next video, we'll come back and we'll finish off the standalone activity. We'll get this, add a little bit of extra code here to get it working, and then we'll actually give it a bit of a test run on my Android device. So I'll see you in that next video.